on me in the back. All right. So don't have sex, you'll get pregnant and die. Right? Most people in here got the Mean Girls reference, right? Right? And it's hilarious because it's this huge go-to of what abstinence-only sex education is. However, most of us have experienced abstinence-only sex education. Would it surprise you if I told you that in Tennessee, if you're going to teach if you're going to teach sex education in schools, it has to be abstinence-only sex education? That's because a couple years ago, it was found that the sexual activity of teenagers in Tennessee was 55%, which is higher than the national average of 47%, according to facttennessee.org. The Tennessee state legislators thought this was problematic, so they passed Tennessee Senate Bill 3310, which said, if you want to teach it, you got to tell them to not, essentially. However, abstinence-only sex education is extremely harmful to our youth. It's ineffective, it reinforces negative stereotypes, and it's dangerous. So let's look at the effectiveness levels. There's been tons of studies done on the federal programs that are funded for abstinence-only sex education. Studies from Mathematica Policy Research Center, National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancy, even a meta-study done by the British Medical Journal. These are all different funding sources, all different areas, so a lot of really good diversity in these studies, and they've all found the same thing. Abstinence-only doesn't really cut it. There is no increased rates of abstinence amongst these teenagers. There are no age differences of when these teenagers engage in sexual activity, and pregnancy and STD rates don't change in areas where abstinence-only education is implemented. So we're funneling millions and millions of dollars into these programs, and they do squat. It's the same thing for state-level programs, because Tennessee's not the only state that has this kind of legislator. States like Pennsylvania, Texas, Arizona, Kansas, Minnesota, Maryland have all looked at their own programs and their own infrastructure, and they find the same thing. There are no significant changes among sexual activity, age rates, pregnancy rates, STD rates in their teenagers with these programs. So it'd be one thing if it just didn't work, right? Who cares? But where we really get into the meat of it is how it's harmful, how it reinforces these negative stereotypes, specifically with gender and the LGBTQ population. For gender, what these programs teach is that women don't have sexual desire and that men have all of the sexual desire. That they are animals and they're beasts and they can't control themselves. And women are these dainty little objects that only want love and happiness in a relationship. And men just want to do it. That's not true. We've all been teenagers. We're humans, and females and males have the exact same level of sexual desire and sexual want, especially within relationships. They find happiness and commitment levels the same, but these programs explicitly teach the opposite. So this reinforces really negative gender stereotypes, and it reinforces the idea of who you should be and how you should act, especially for women, because these programs teach women to dress and act a certain way so we don't go with the men on. But this promotes, again, really negative stereotypes, especially for sexuality, for both men and women. So, but let's go away into the LGBTQ population, because these programs teach, okay, don't have sex because you don't want to get pregnant, you want to stay pure for marriage. That's a problem in the LGBTQ community because you're not going to get pregnant, and in a lot of states you still can't get married. Well, these programs basically ignore that entire population of students. They expect that heterosexual marriage is the expected norm, and that if they do talk about being gay, they say that it's a disease, or because of AIDS, or that it's sexually deviant behavior. And again, this is extremely harmful, especially to these students who are already probably struggling with their sexuality and who they are and where they fit in with the world. And then they have these programs that tell them they're sexual deviants. A lot of reinforcement of negative stereotypes, and this doesn't help anything. It doesn't solve. It only makes teenagers look down on themselves. And when we really get into the last bit of where it's harmful, it's just the pure danger level of these programs. These programs promote false, leading, and distorted information. The Minority House Staff Government Reform Committee back in 2004 looked at 13 different federally funded programs. These programs were used in over 69 organizations, over 25 different states. And they found that 2 of them were factually correct. 2 of 13. What these other false leading programs taught was things like pregnancy results in touching another person's genitals. Or that, yeah, I see that look. Or that HIV can be transmitted through sweat and tears. And that 10% of women who get abortions become sterile. These are scare tactics. And they say don't even touch another person's genitals because you're going to get the pregnancy. And what we see is that these are falsified myths, because remember back earlier how we're talking about these don't work in preventing sexual activity. So they're given all these lies and these myths and these scare tactics, and then they touch another person's genitals and don't get pregnant, and they're like, I don't believe any of this. In fact, advocatesforyouth.org cites that only 23% of teenagers who undergo abstinence-only sex education use a condom for the first time. 23%, and that's it. Because they don't know how. They weren't taught safe sex. They were taught don't touch people. The same site cites that areas that implement abstinence-only sex education programs have higher rates of STD rates than areas with a comprehensive sex education program of 8.8% versus 5.8%. So these teenagers are contracting sexually transmitted diseases. They're getting pregnant because they're not buying into the scare tactics and the falsified myths, and this is where the danger really sets in. So what we see here, and what I hope I've shown you, is how abstinence-only sex education is not the way to go. If Tennessee really wants to decrease the rate of sexual activity amongst their teenagers, comprehensive sex education is how we do it. Yes, you can talk about abstinence, but you also talk about how to use a condom, and safe sex, and love, and relationships, and what that means, because for many teenagers it's extremely confusing and scary. This is the way to go. This is how you decrease rates. Or if anything, if they're going to have sex, at least they're going to be safe about it. So I hope today that I've really shown you how abstinence-only sex education doesn't work and how it is extremely harmful. And I thank you guys so much.